Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. For those of you who are new here, my name is Miranda and I am the Enchantress of Avalon. And I like to talk about all subjects mystical and magical, and I want to take you on a journey into Avalon. So for today's video, I decided, as it is Fairy Friday, I'm going to talk about a little bit of a darker aspect of fairy that isn't talked about enough, and it was actually inspired by two things. One is my love of a particular ballet, and the second thing it's inspired by is some YouTube videos I watched recently that referred to fairies as a little bit too angelic to be considered very sexy. And I have to disagree. Hard disagree on that. Now, that comes to the subject of today's video, and this is vampire fairies or vampiric fairies. So basically, the concept of a vampiric fairy is something that is seen prevalently in the folklore and fairy lore traditions for centuries, really. And fairies are always instinctually sexual. They're innately a sexual being because, I've talked about this a lot, fairies don't live by human rules and human standards, so they can be and embrace the natural fun of their sexuality without worrying about being deemed something negative. You know, they aren't deemed a whore or something else more negative that I don't want to even state because I don't really like those terms. They are just beings who are embracing their sexuality, and they all do it, and it's accepted. So besides the videos talking about how sexy vampires are and how fairies are a little too angelic to be sexy, I was also inspired by my love of one of my favorite ballets. See, my favorite ballet of all time is the Sleeping Beauty Ballet by Tchaikovsky. And my favorite production of it, I've never gotten to see it live, but I have seen this several times, is Matthew Bourne's Sleeping Beauty, A Gothic Romance. I do have the DVD, as you can see. It's not readily available on streaming services, even to purchase the digital copy of it, so I have the physical DVD copy. What Matthew Bourne does with this is he decides to take a little bit of a twist on the tale. He does this purposefully because, just like Walt Disney before him, he saw the inherent flaw in Sleeping Beauty, and that is the insta-love thing. In the modern day, we tend to be very suspect of this whole, oh, I just met you, but I'm in love with you instantly thing. Relationships don't really work like that. So instead, let's build a relationship, at least a little bit, between the two lovers before this kiss has to happen. In the case of Walt Disney, they just had the curse last only a few hours, and Philip kisses her awake, and she wakes up, and they get married. But they had fallen in love already by meeting in the woods, and they have that really sweet Once Upon a Dream sequence. One of my favorite scenes in the film. I love it. My husband, every time we watch it, because he does watch it with me, he's a good sport, he says that he thinks that her dancing around barefoot in the woods with all of the animals is kind of my heaven. Like, if I had a personal heaven, that's what it would be. He's not really that wrong, though. Anyway, so Matthew Bourne took it in a different direction, though, because he still wanted to have that 100-year-long curse upon her. So how do you have a 100-year curse, but still have your protagonists meet and fall in love before the curse? Vampires. So he made all of the fairies in his production also vampires. It's brilliant. And the male lead of the production gets bitten and turned into a vampire fairy, and then he's able to live with immortality for the next century. And then he, of course, gets to wake her and everything. Another thing it plays on that's very awesome is he took cues from the Disney Sleeping Beauty movie, and also a little bit, I think, from Tangled, in having the lead dancer. She's technically acting a role, but she's dancing. She's the lead dancer of it. in the Aurora role, she is dancing barefoot, no slippers in sight, which I think is brilliant because it's part of Aurora's rebellious nature. And I will die on this hill. Aurora isn't just this completely passive character that a lot of people want to portray her as because she's asleep for a lot of her film. That doesn't make her passive. In the times when she's awake, we see her actively wanting to rebel. She actively comes home and says, well, I'm in love with this person. I don't want to be a princess. I just want to marry this guy. Not knowing that it's already her fiance. But she says, I don't want to, be married off to a prince. I want to marry this man I've fallen in love with. I want to do this. I want to do that. And she, is crying and upset and actively desiring to rebel and trying to rebel the best she can. That is not a passive figure. That's someone who is aching to rebel and trying to rebel, but living in a society and in a role as a princess where she can't do this. So I want to clarify that. Now, where does this whole idea of these vampiric fairies come from? Actually, directly from fairy lore. I think I mentioned this at the very beginning of the video. We have had these darker fairies from the very beginning. They've always existed. And fairy lore, in fact, a lot of it is very negative against the fae. They aren't these flower fairies and pixies, Tinkerbell-like figures in the beginning at all. That's actually born directly out of the Victorian period, where we see them become these twee little adorable fairies. Not to say there aren't twee little adorable fairies as well, but there are darker ones. And in fact, the earlier folklore that has been around for hundreds of years, thousands actually, but written for hundreds of years, is this aspect of like fairy abductions and changelings and all of these darker fairy aspects. And also this is why there's the fear of the banshee. The banshee is this figure that is said to cause death. Really, she predicts death. Although she is related to goddesses who can cause it. So that's where the confusion may lie. Now, there's a different type of fairy that I've talked about before. She's one of my favorites. The Lananshi. The Lananshi is a type of fairy that is used by Keats in his poem La Belle Merci, which I did an entire video on my interpretations of, and I can link that down below for you. And also I'll link in my line-by-line analysis relating La Belle Merci to Morgan Le Fay from my blog down in the description below. But anyway, these vampiric fairy figures are present in the Lananshi. So Lananshi is a vampiric kind of fairy because what they do is they develop these sexual relationships with human men, and in these relationships they act as this muse-like figure, and also it's very they are sexual relationships. So they're both a muse-like figure and this obsessive sexual figure to the men that they are with. And through this sexual relationship, I've always read it as, now this could be my interpretation, but I've always read it as the Lananshi feeding through sexual intercourse. Sort of like your traditional succubus type figure. And succubi are related to vampiric figures, of course. Well, the Lananshi, it works kind of very similarly. They are essentially feeding through their sexual intercourse with this man, and in return, they're inspiring him to great feats of creativity, no matter what his creative pursuit may be. He might be a musician, he might be a painter, or he might be a poet. And I think that Keats may have been inspired by this because he felt like he had a Lananshi in his life. Again, he never calls her a Lananshi, he calls her a fairy's child. He says that she is taking him to an elfin grot and everything. But I think it's a really romantic idea to think, well, what if Keats himself was in a relationship with Lananshi? Maybe that's why he died so young. She left him and he began to wither away, and in the time they just thought it was consumption. Common ailment, right? Happens to everybody. Anyone who has consumption dies. But the symptoms of consumption, it must be noted, are really similar to the descriptions of what happens to men when their non-she lovers leave them or drop them back off in the human world, as happens in Belle and Merci. And we also see little hints of this in certain fairy tales, and Sleeping Beauty being a prime example. The evil fairy cursing Sleeping Beauty has a sort of vampiric presence. She wants her to be pricked. I want her to prick her finger on the spindle of a spinning wheel. How is the pricking of the finger really that different than the biting of a vampire? It is this still very penetrative act. And this is also why I disagree with this whole virginal vampire crap, because vampirism in and of itself is a sexual act. I know this is slightly off topic, but vampirism is a sexual act. There is penetration and there is exchange of bodily fluids. Just like sex. So I just needed to note that. But anyway, the pricking on a spindle can be seen as a similarly sexual act to the act of vampirism itself. And it can be seen in other fairy tales too, to a certain extent. Any manipulative character who's seen to be feeding on people in some way. In Sleeping Beauty, in Snow White, the fact that she actually wants to eat the heart and the liver of Snow White, that is, again, this very, consumption of blood and organs. It's certainly a very vampiric act. And it must be noted that a lot of modern interpretations of Snow White actually do have her as a vampire figure. In fact, Neil Gaiman uses that in Snow, Glass, and Apples, I believe is the title of it. It's an amazing short story that he did that then became a graphic novel. I don't have that one, but I have his Sleeping Beauty based one, which again takes a very dark take on Sleeping Beauty. So, but again, Snow White is the villain in that, and the evil queen isn't an evil queen. She's actually Snow White's victim, and Snow White's a vampire. It's really, really cool. And the illustrations in the graphic novel are absolutely gorgeous. And the same thing with the Sleeping Beauty one. I think it's right behind me, actually. It is. Here. Since I'm talking about Sleeping Beauty and Snow White anyway, this is The Sleeper and the Spindle. This is the Neil Gaiman one, and I don't know if it's the same person that illustrated both this and Snow, Glass, and Apples, but the illustrations in both are just so lovely. And these illustrations also have this beautiful black, white, and gold scheme here. Like, look how gorgeous that is. I highly recommend both. I really do want to buy a copy of Snow, Glass, and Apples because it's a beautiful book. So, I think I've pretty much covered everything I wanted to cover today. I highly recommend those two Neil Gaiman graphic novels about Snow White and Sleeping Beauty Reimagined. And I also highly recommend, if you could get your hands on this and have an interest in ballet, this is just an excellent production. It is Matthew Bourne's Sleeping Beauty, A Gothic Romance. And as a lover of all things Gothic and a lover of everything Halloween related, in fact, in my book, Halloween should be every day, but since it realistically isn't, I celebrate Halloween from September 1st onward until actually November, really. My decorations stay up until November, and some stay up all year round. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me today. And I hope you have a very happy and blessed Fairy Friday. And I will see you in my next video. Please like, subscribe, comment, and check out my blog, whiteroseofavalon.life, for more content. Bye now.